And we're back with Dark Souls 3. 3. And this is post-commentary because I honestly cannot be fucked doing live commentary for this DLC. Mainly it's because I just feel like I'm getting burnt out with, I guess not Dark Souls content, but I mean, Dark Souls 3, I guess, because I only just recently finished playing the main game not too long ago. And I feel like I just need a bit of a break from maybe Dark Souls, because we've got Final Fantasy 15 coming up really soon, like 29th of November, I'm pretty sure. And I've been playing Final Fantasy Type 0 recently. So I'm thinking that that'll be the next playthrough on the channel. I will eventually go back to Dark Souls 2. I know I've been saying that for like a year now, but I will get back to it, and I will finish that series of the DLC and all that stuff to do with like going in depth with the DLC lore and all that, etc. But I think for now, to just get back on track with like good commentary and I mean, just good playthroughs in general, so I can do good live commentary while I enjoy playing something that doesn't feel like I'm just going through the motions over and over again with it, like I kind of feel like this DLC is. I've already said it, and I'm going to go into why in this video, but I don't like this DLC all that much. It's fine, it's just not either worth the money or quality for the price that it costs, in my opinion. So in this video, I'm going to be going into why I think that is or why I think that happened, or why I think the DLC is like this. And the reasons for the parts that I dislike. So hopefully we can get all that done in this 30-minute video, and then next episode will be post-commentary as well. Basically every episode from now on is going to be post-commentary, but there's only about probably like 1 or 2 episodes left after this one. I think probably 1 episode, just because the episode after this will end with the final boss of the DLC. And I'm sorry that this isn't live commentary, so you can't see my reactions to all this stuff as I'm going through this new area. But I actually haven't gotten to the second or third phase of the last boss yet. I've only just started it, and I know what the first phase is, but I haven't gotten anywhere past that. I kind of just gave up on it for now because I was, like I said, feeling a bit burnt out. I just left it for the day, and I haven't gone back to it since. So I will do that boss fight with live commentary. I will record live commentary for the entire thing so you can see my reaction to it, because people are saying that it's the best part of the DLC, and that you guys would probably want to see my reaction to it, gauging from the fact that the rest of my commentary hasn't been stellar thus far. So I will also be doing a review of this DLC after I complete this series of videos for the DLC. The playthrough videos, that is. And then we're going to move on to Final Fantasy 15 when it comes out. I'm currently downloading the new Japanese demo for Final Fantasy 15, which is the Judgment Disc demo, which kind of bugs me that it is Japan only, but apparently the sales in Japan haven't been doing as well as they thought compared to the rest of the world for Final Fantasy 15, even though they've basically based the entire game around a Japanese like group of friends that all currently like dressed in the Japanese kind of I don't know, not boy band attire, but the style of fashion that's popular there right now. I don't know how well that'll translate as the years go by, and if it'll stay kind of current. Maybe not, but you know, we'll see what happens if the JP demo does increase the amount of sales for Japan. Then obviously it worked, but currently it is a Japan-only demo, and it's about an hour and a half long, and it goes through the first chapter of Final Fantasy 15, and I'm going to try and play that on the channel before 15 comes out. I'm currently downloading it, as I said. It's 13 gigabytes just for the first chapter, which is crazy. So God, I can't even imagine what the actual full game will be when it comes to a digital download. But yeah, I'll probably play that, and then we'll play 15 when it comes out as well. But in this video, as I said, I'm going to go over basically what I dislike about this DLC, what I like, and where I think they could have improved on quite a few things, unfortunately. Yeah, quite a few things. A lot of this DLC reminds me of some of the worst parts of Dark Souls 2, and I'm not sure which team at From Software worked on this. Maybe it was like the B team that worked on this again, or the quote-unquote B team. But it feels like a B team sort of... To me, anyway, it feels like a B team sort of creation or a development process. So, to start things off, let's talk about the overarching world. So, the painted world of Ariandel, or Ariandel, I don't know how to pronounce it really. It's gets said by every character differently in the DLC. So, the entire world is basically very reminiscent of the painted world of Ariamis in Dark Souls 1, which is great. I love the fact that they went back to that idea. The painted world of Ariamis in Dark Souls 1. God, they had to make them both A-letter names, didn't they? So we'd constantly be getting them confused if we were talking about them in like a commentary video or something. But I like the fact that they chose to go back to something that they knew people really liked from Dark Souls 1, and they could definitely expand upon in the lore. I don't know really what the lore connections are to the painted world quite yet. I think I heard somewhere that the painted world of Ariamis was kind of like fading. Holy shit, did you? Yeah, that guy like just jumps down from the fucking mountain to throw a spear at me and actually hits me. But yeah, so the painted world of Ariamis was originally one of the first area. I think it might have been the actual first area created in Dark Souls 1's development. And it almost got scrapped, but they chose to include it in the final product of Dark Souls 1, and it ended up being one of the best levels in the entire game, especially level design-wise. And I can really see that they've tried to kind of recreate the painted world of Ariamis in this DLC with the painted world of Ariandel, but man, this one falls so much flatter for me. It really doesn't strike the same chord as the atmosphere or the level design in the painted world of Ariamis. And I'm just taking a look at that bell because I'm not really sure if it could have been... I can't remember if there was a bell in the Ariamis world, but if there was, that could have been a connection to the actual painted world of Ariamis right there. If it wasn't, then, you know what, just disregard whatever I said just then. But yeah, that's one pro for me. I really like the fact that they are reusing the idea of the painted worlds and the Abyss. The Abyss is this like kind of red pus sort of stuff that you see. It looks very different from the Abyss that we already know, like from the Ulasil DLC in Dark Souls 1, the Artorias of the Abyss DLC. In that DLC, the Abyss was basically like black and purple, and in this one it's red and like pussy and oozy and just way more gross looking. It seems to grow and infest, and almost as if it's some sort of contagion that is taking over this painted world. So I do like the overarching story and ideas and lore within this DLC. That's not the part that annoys me or makes me dislike this DLC. The parts that make me dislike this DLC are things like the bland areas, the bland, like, generic fantasy area 01, like, kind of designs for areas in this DLC. Like, if you showed me a picture of a rocky hillside from, like, the Aleum Lois DLC from Dark Souls 2, or any other snow area in the Dark Souls series, maybe like Aleum Lois or Irithyll of the Boreal Valley, or any other snow areas or winter areas in the Dark Souls games. I'm sure there are some that I'm not noting. But say you were someone that had never seen or played these games and you showed them a picture of each of those three areas, and if you said they were all the same area, I bet that person would be inclined to believe you. Now, that's not to say that I don't like every area in the DLC. I do like the Corvian settlement quite a bit, mainly because it reminds me of the Bloodborne DLC, the first kind of part of that DLC, which is in the waterways. But even that, in its own respect, is a bit of a con, because it already reminds me of something that I've seen before. I don't want things that I've seen before or remind me of things that I've seen before in these DLC areas. We really, most of us want something new. We want a new experience from the Dark Souls series that we haven't experienced in the main game. That's why we get these expansions, or that's at least why I get these expansions, because I want a new experience from a game I've already played and know and love. And this DLC didn't give me that. It gave me something that I felt I'd already experienced. And I'll get back to that in a second, but we just picked up this item, which is the Follower Torch. An offensive torch used by the Farron followers provides light and doubles as a weapon. Some forms of the Abyss manifest as pus within the body, treated from ancient times with fire. The items in this DLC are also another thing that I dislike, and I'll get to that in a second. Not the items themselves, just mainly how you find them and the risk-reward system for getting them. So for the areas, I'll basically summarize it like this. They're just really bland areas with mostly uninspired area designs that we've already seen over and over in other titles. Corvian Settlement is almost a mirror image of the Bloodborne DLC earlier areas, and areas up until the Corvian Settlement are mostly all barren fields with trees or rocks to make them look populated. But this is really just a facade to give the appearance of depth to the area, and it's not a very good facade either, because it's mainly just a cover-up for an area that feels either not unfinished, but uninspired. The areas aren't really bad level design wise in any way. It's mostly just the aesthetics and the designs of them that annoy me, or not even really annoy me. It's just kind of disappointing, more so. And this disappointment carries all the way through the DLC, probably up until the final boss. The final boss has so far been the only thing that has made me go, oh, that's different. It's unique, and I'm glad that they ended the DLC on the high note, because the build-up to that is not very... I wouldn't say it's fun, or it hasn't been fun for me at least. The enemies. Let's get onto the enemies. So the enemies also follow the same route as... And I'll come back to that tree, don't worry, I will get that shortcut. I just didn't see it at first when I was coming around this area, because I thought I was being followed by those Millwood Knights. But, okay, this is also another area that I did like. It's a fucked up area, and there's a lot of enemies in it, which is another thing that I'm about to talk about. But I think it's more of a unique aesthetic to this DLC than the Barren Fields and Corvian Settlement are. I feel this more closely mirrors the themes and atmosphere of Dark Souls 3 than any of the stuff before it in the DLC. So, as I was saying before, the enemies in this DLC also follow the same kind of route as, or the same kind of opinion that I have of them as the environment. They don't feel like anything new. They feel like everything that we've seen before in the Soul series. Just dogs, the wolves, they're basically almost just reskinned versions of dogs that have slightly different AI, that work in packs, like they have that howl mechanic that draw more of them to your location, and they have a bit of different animation. Like they have a few different animations for attacks, like the jump attacks, and then also the strafing and circling around the character. But other than that, they're just dog enemies. Let's be honest here, they're just dog enemies, and we've seen those in literally every FromSoft game since Demon Souls. Every FromSoft Dark Souls-esque game since Demon Souls. Like, probably, I don't know, are they in Armored Core? Does Armored Core have dog enemies? I don't know. But they're really nothing new, and that's what's disappointing. Even the night enemies. Oh, I got fucked up here, yeah. Yeah, I got fucked, yeah. But yeah, the night enemies, they're not anything new either. They're a different variant of humanoid enemies that we already have in the game, which are they're kind of like Viking sort of Norse enemies. That, sure, it gives us a cool new variant of humanoid enemies that we haven't seen before in the Souls series. I don't think we actually have seen any Norse-looking humanoid enemies at all. In Demon Souls, we had a Norse kind of area, which was the what is it called? The boss at the end of the Shrine of Storms. The Storm King, I think it was the Storm King. The monoliths in that arena, they have Norse inscriptions on them. I think that's the closest we've ever come to really having anything Norse in the Souls games. So that's a pro. We have Norse enemies. That's pretty cool. But they're still nothing new. It would have been nice to see some more embellishment and more exploration of that Norse theme, but it seems like they just made Norse enemies with Norse Viking designs and then just stopped there. And then they went, alright, wolves and some giant flies. That they don't feel like they mesh together very well at all. And I feel like if we would have gotten a more cohesive design of areas and enemies, then this DLC would have been way more enjoyable for me anyway, because as someone who holds the design of these games in such high regard, for the most part, especially Bloodborne's whole world cohesively ties together no matter what the enemy is. They all make sense, and they all fit the same structure of the story, the lore, the areas, and each enemy works together with the next that you find, in terms of design anyway. And that's what I was hoping this DLC would give me, a cohesive world with everything feeling like it fit together properly. But to me, it feels kind of fractured in a way, in a design aspect. The world of Ariandel, design-wise, feels like it's been cut into chunks. Like, we have this area that has the flies in it, but no other enemies, and then we have the snowfields and the Corvian settlement, each bearing their own enemy in regards, but we don't see any mixture of those enemies at all. So it's hard to say that they're cohesive in any way, since they all stick to the areas that seem to match their aesthetics. But I would have liked to see mixtures of those enemies in other areas, just to give that cohesiveness more bearing on the world, because, like I said, it feels like the design is fractured and cut and split into different areas in the DLC that don't interact with each other, and therefore it creates an experience that feels quite disconnected design-wise, and makes the DLC feel a lot more linear than it should. So it kind of cuts down your options of where to go, since you have to systematically go through each of these areas that feel chopped into pieces, and they don't feel like they blend or seamlessly take the player through this world in an aesthetic that follows all the way through, to me anyway. I would have liked to see a more blended type of world with more blended environments, possibly more interesting environments, as I said previously, and I would have liked the enemies themselves to have had less reliance on ganking and overwhelming the player than just having these enemies that we know that Dark Souls can do, that challenge the player just by having one of them on the screen at a time. The Millwood Knights are quite a good example of that, actually. The Millwood Knights are probably one of the best enemies in this DLC, on the humanoid side anyway. Actually, I would argue that they are the only good humanoid enemy in this DLC, because one of them by themselves is challenging. However, this DLC doesn't use them in that way. Instead, they take the Dark Souls 2 approach, and they throw one or two Millwood Knights at you, as well as some wolves, like a whole pack of wolves, or some Farron followers, that then can call upon more Farron followers, and you're just swimming in a sea of enemies by the time you interact with the first one. Even down here, it's an example of what I'm talking about. There are probably at least 20 giant flies down in this pit. And I also do have a problem with the progression of the DLC as well, and figuring out the vagueness of where to go. But I'll get to that in a second, because that also correlates with what's down here as well. But 20 flies. Granted, they don't all charge the player at the same time, but that is just... it's unfathomable to me. Since when in a game, or especially a Dark Souls game, do you need that many enemies in one area to intimidate the player? Even one enemy or two enemies by themselves coming at the player at once in Dark Souls is intimidating. 20 enemies, and if you suicide run this, it activates them all, and I do that later and I get away unscathed, which is a fucking miracle. But this is my biggest gripe with this DLC. The overuse and abundance of enemies. Basically, every time you step foot out into an area, you will be probably welcomed by about at least 4 enemies. And they aren't used sparingly at all. They're just thrown at the player in giant groups over and over again until the player dies. It doesn't seem like they're used in any systematical way that forces the player to outmaneuver them or outthink them. They just have to keep using brute force until they're all dead. And to me, that's not what Dark Souls is about. Dark Souls is about thinking your way out of these situations that are still fair, but challenging. Throwing 20 enemies at a player all at once is not fair. Sure, it's challenging, and if they're going the route to just make Dark Souls the difficulty machine that most people assume it is, then kudos, you did a good job. But it loses the spirit of what the game is about in doing so. This DLC without a doubt falls into the same trappings as Dark Souls 2 had with its enemies. And the only reason people say Dark Souls 2 is really difficult, or more difficult sometimes than Dark Souls 1, is because of that overabundance of enemies. And I think even in a, I don't want to quote Lobos or anything that he's said. I was just watching his stream with his brother that is currently playing Dark Souls 2, and he was asking which one was more difficult, Dark Souls 1 or Dark Souls 2. And I'm pretty sure Lobos, just in his opinion, said that Dark Souls 2 can be more difficult because of the amount of enemies that you have to face. And that is the same thing that I feel this DLC falls under. A difficulty through overuse of enemies. And that's why most of the time you'll see me running past enemies or just through to other areas and disregarding enemy encounters altogether. Because this DLC does not encourage the risk-reward system that the main game does. As you've seen, as I've been playing, I've been killing groups of enemies to get to these items that they've been guarding. And then those items end up being shit like dung pies, no pun intended, or prism stones, or useless consumables that I can buy from the Shrine Handmaiden at any time that I want. Any of the new weapons or armor sets in this DLC are either found in spots that are occupied with either the strongest enemies in the DLC or giant groups of enemies that just gank the player if they get anywhere close to that item. Like down in this spot, also up on the hill where you find the follower javelin. Another example is the church with the 2 Corvian knights in it that guard the Way of White Corona miracle. And then also the follower torch, which was found at the bottom of that hill with the wolf, which was the easiest to find item by any means, and it was actually a new weapon in the DLC. So as I said, this DLC does not encourage that risk-reward system, because when you kill smaller groups of enemies that then reward you with dung pies, how is the player meant to feel invested in going to find more items guarded by even stronger enemies? They don't feel invested in doing so, because the only items they've been given up to that point have been shitty consumables that mean nothing to them. So putting their self into more risk to just receive more shitty consumable items is not worth it. Therefore, they won't go out of their way to do so, like I don't. Because as someone who knows how these games work, I don't feel a need to go collect everything in the level, because most likely, more often than not, they will just be shitty items. That being said, the new weapons in this DLC are some of the best weapons, or at least some of the best movesets on weapons in this entire game. The new weapon additions are great. They're awesome weapons, like the Crow Talons, the Crow Quills, and then also stuff like the Onyx Blade and the, what's it called? I think it's called Valor Heart. And those items are probably the only ones worth going to get in the DLC, even though they're guarded by a plethora of enemies. And the DLC doesn't encourage going to find them because of the shitty items that the player found previously to knowing that those ones existed. Another example of that is the giant tree and the Earthshaker weapon that is guarded by, I think, 6 Millwood Knights. I think there's 2 with bows and arrows, and then 3 that jump down to fight you, and then 1 more that guards it down in the cavern. So, 3 fucking Millwood Knights on the ground, or 4, sorry, and then 2 shooting you from above. I just said, fuck that, it's not worth going to get, I'm not going to use the weapon, I might as well just ignore it completely, and that's what I did, and now we're in this location. And then I also go down there in a second at the end of the video, that's where I'll end this video fighting that Mad Phantom, but I can't believe I did this in one go. Mainly because the platforming sections of this DLC are another part that I have a huge gripe with, mainly just because since the roots of the trees that come out of the wall aren't a solid platform, or not, they are solid but they're not flat, it's very easy to slip off them at any moment when you're running down them, so it makes it so much more annoying, especially in the part where you're going down to the depths of the painting, having enemies on the roots that try to fight you, and then also having the enemies that shoot you with an arrow when you're trying to descend down the vines or the roots. And that in no way is a fair position for the player to be in. I would say it would have been fair if there would have been no singular enemies on the vines, and you just would have had the bowmen shooting you, but both of them being there just make And I fucked up here. This is when I have to suicide run the entire area, and I just choose to grab everything except for Wilhelm's set. I got turned around and confused with where I was, and then I basically fell into the predicament that you see now. So, haha, my fault. But yeah, the platforming sections are fucking ridiculous. They're some of the worst I've ever seen in any of the Dark Souls games. And that includes stuff like the Roof of Anor Londo. I find that part easier to do than I do the vines in this DLC. And I'm sure that many of you agree that Dark Souls should not have platforming elements, since it's not a platforming game. But nevertheless, they have them anyway, and we have to deal with them because that's how they want to make these levels. And sure, it makes the level design more interesting, but the gameplay does not work in sync with the level design, which is one of the things that annoys me, because it's so easy to fall off these platforms that it kind of counterbalances the gameplay that's going on. On a good note, I don't mind this platforming section nearly as much as the other one though, since the other one has enemies and more pitfalls on it, where the vines are much easier to fall off because they have less of a flat footing. And oh shit, Judgment Disc just finished downloading, so I guess that will be a video within the next 2 to 3 days, hopefully, because I'm planning on putting this one up today, and then the next part of the DLC tomorrow, which should be either the finale or semi-finale, and then I'm keen to play Judgment Disc, so I won't be playing it today, unfortunately, even though I really want to, but I will be playing it soon enough. But yeah, we're going to end this video with the Mad Phantom down here, and yeah, and I guess next episode we'll carry on talking about the DLC. I'll try to be not so negative, since I do want to get to some positives as well. This episode was mainly the negatives. I want to end the DLC on a high note with the boss fight and some positives as to what I like about the DLC, but it is very hard for me to like this DLC from a game design standpoint, just because there are so many problems with it that I have seen recurring in previous titles, especially like Dark Souls 2, but it's not a game breaker for me. It's not a deal breaker, and that's what I'm glad about. This DLC is still fine as it is, but I don't think the quality and amount of content that is in the DLC, especially if you don't like playing PvP, I don't think it's worth the price as advertised. Especially since the additional content is very small, especially within the amount of weapons, armor sets, and areas and bosses that you get, because you only really get one boss and then a pseudo-boss, which is below us right now, and you can read that if you want to. It just talks about the pyromancer guy that we're about to fight. But yeah, I don't think the boss below us right now counts as a boss, or I wouldn't count it as a boss, because it's mainly just an NPC, and that's a bit misleading. But anyway, we're about to fight Pyromancer Dunnel, so I'll let you guys enjoy it, and I will see you next episode.